Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. How prepared are you for a grid down scenario? Well, grim estimates from the government estimate that up to 90% of the population could be wiped out after just 1 year without power. Today's remarkable guest has a much more optimistic view. Today, I'm honored to be here with the one and only Mykel Hawke, a U.S. Special Forces captain and combat veteran, TV star, best-selling author, and outdoor survival expert. You might recognize Mykel from a number of TV shows, including Man, Woman, Wild, where he and his wife Ruth work together to survive in legit life-threatening situations like raging backcountry firestorms or being lost at sea. With limited to no supplies, Mykel and Ruth resort to eating reptiles, bugs, and even rotting raccoons in precarious situations. So if you want to conquer fear, be prepared for worst-case scenarios, and make survival preparedness fun for the whole family, this show is for you. Now, before we get there, here's a review Erin dropped for our product Future Greens over at wildsuperfoods.com. She rates it 5 out of 5 stars and says, "So good, you guys, Future Greens is amazing." As an avid listener of the Fat Burning Man podcast, I've heard Abel talk about these for months now and wanted to give them a try because number one, I am so bad about eating veggies, and number two, I like to vote with my dollar and support businesses that I trust to actually look out for our nation's health instead of solely focusing on profits and those that are helping reverse the diabetes crisis. I honestly expected this green powder to taste terrible and planned to take it like a shot of whiskey, but I tried it mixed in water and it is delicious. Seriously, it has been easy to drink this every day and I actually enjoy it. Thanks Abel and Allison for making it easy for me to fit vegetables into my hectic lifestyle. Hey Erin, thank you so much for listening to this show and for all of your support. This is a wonderful review and every little review helps so much. So Future Greens, yes, we have tried, Allison and I have probably tried dozens and dozens, maybe even hundreds of different types of greens powders and green supplements over the years, and I totally agree. Most of them taste terrible, like just lawn clippings or fish tank or something else that you really need to choke down. But when we started Wild Superfoods, we wanted to make sure that people would be encouraged to keep taking Future Greens and collagen cocoa and Fizzy C and these other things, especially kids. And so we tested it with our families and of course ourselves, and we stand by it. We believe that Future Greens is the best tasting greens out there. One of the other reasons we created Wild Superfoods and Future Greens, Fizzy C, collagen cocoa, and some of the other supplements in particular is for camping, off-grid, survival scenarios, going fishing, just being away from refrigerators for a period of time. Our supplements have saved our butts so many times on the road when we've been flying, driving, RVing, just away from the house. But even at the house, sometimes, we have lived in very remote areas, and it's been super useful to have a powdered shelf-stable source of nutrients like Future Greens or collagen cocoa around, because otherwise you have boxed mac and cheese, or you could try making some pancakes or something, which isn't always the best call. So if you have the nutrients around, hopefully you'll take them, and we believe that they are the best out there. So if you're interested in checking out Wild Superfoods and helping to vote with your dollar and support this show and the work that we do, then please go over to wildsuperfoods.com. Check out Future Greens. We've just added some brand new subscribe and save and bundle options to help make sure that you can stock up for less. And I'll just say this really quickly. We are not the cheapest supplements out there. And we also do not have the highest profit margins at all. We have very slim profit margins, especially after we pay for shipping, which we cover for our orders. And a lot of the other supplement companies out there cut corners, they cut costs, and they might even be sacrificing, your health in the process of that exchange. And we've been on the wrong end of receiving counterfeit products from Amazon and broken or spoiled and whatever. And so we believe in trust and honesty, doing the right thing, putting out quality products out there, and giving people the best deal that we possibly can. So that's what we do. And as a thanks for being some of the first people to check out Wild Superfoods, please use the promo code WILD15 for 15% off your first order. You could use that for Future Greens, our powdered shelf-stable fruit and veggie mix. We also have collagen cocoa, which is super delicious, and you could use it in baked goods as well. Vitamin D stack, Mega Omegas, Vitamin C stack, Fizzy C, all of these. Please check them out. We hope you like them. And don't forget to use the promo code WILD15 for 15% off your first order. All right, on to this show with Mykel Hawke. You'll learn why Mykel resorts to eating rodents, reptiles, and bugs in sketchy situations, simple methods to protect yourself against the real threats of the wild, how to collect and sanitize water in an emergency, how to make survival preparedness fun for kids, the 8 pillars of survival, how to face your fears from someone who's been stalked by a jaguar through the Amazon jungle, and tons more. My wife Allison and I have been rewatching season 1 and 2 of Man, Woman, Wild, and it's fantastic. We don't watch much TV, especially not anymore, but Man, Woman, Wild came out about the same time that I started this podcast, a little more than 10 years ago, which is crazy to think about. But of all the survival shows out there, I think Man, Woman, Wild is probably the best one, especially because of the pairing of Mykel and Ruth, which both are brilliant and very effective, but also the interpersonal relationship dynamics are incredibly entertaining and informative, and we've really learned a lot from watching Mykel and Ruth. So we hope you enjoy that. Once more, it's season 1 and 2 of Man, Woman, Wild over on Discovery. And don't forget to check out Mykel's books as well. But we hope you like this interview. I really like how it came out. We had a great time. So let's go hang out with Mykel. Welcome back, folks. Today we're here with the one and only Mykel Hawke, a U.S. Special Forces captain and combat veteran, TV star, best-selling author, outdoor survival expert as well. You may recognize Mykel from his role on the fantastic show Man, Woman, and Wild on the Discovery Channel, where he and his wife Ruth work together to survive in the wild with limited supplies and basically inhospitable locations all around the world. Mykel is also multilingual, a best-selling author of multiple books, and a certified badass with high-level black belts in Aikido and Judo. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
Thank you for having me, sir.
It really is an honor. I've loved watching your TV shows over the years, and even more so as I've been getting into your books, especially this family survival guide, which you wrote with your wife. I've just been so impressed with how many bases you cover in very few words and often very few pages as well. And the survival handbook, I mean, the whole section on all the bugs that you can get when you're in these conditions and how you manage them with all sorts of different strategies. It's really just amazing, but also probably bewildering to people who are just starting to get into this whole survival type mentality, right?
Okay, bewildering is an interesting choice of adjectives. So why bewildering? Are you just saying that just so much for them to take on board at first bite?
Well, it seems so. Maybe I'm thinking in particular of how many
I've called
bugs
you out already. Sorry about
how
that.
many how many bugs and rodents you and your family eat together. Where most people are a little squeamish when it comes to survival, and I think one of the most telling things that you teach, or one of the things that I think is really powerful for a lot of people, is, and maybe I'll have you explain it. People who are uncomfortable killing another creature or animal to survive. The little thing that you say back, I think, is really useful.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a brilliant point, especially because I just finished a show in India, martial arts oriented show. And, of course, uh, basically with a largely Hindu population, killing isn't really something they're keen on. So it's significant for most people when you have to take a life to preserve your own, right? And there almost seems something incongruous about that. But what I always try to remind people is, when you are truly in a survival situation, you do what you must, as long as you do so with honor, so that you can survive and return to your loved ones. I mean, that's really why we're here, right? We want to be here for the ones that we love. So whenever I get people who really do just not want to kill a chicken or a bunny or something like that that they need for survival, I just remind them that, hey, which one do you love more, that little bun or your baby at home? And then they usually get to the business of killing and then eating. And usually they are very thankful and they usually enjoy the meal and it's very savory. So I don't hear any complaints after the eating part.
But for whatever reason, in the civilian Western world, anyway, people are so distanced from the idea that, like, there's a picture of one of your children holding a what is it? Not a squirrel, but a little rodent of some kind, right? Eating chipmunks, I think it was.
Right?
And
Yep.
most people want to believe that food comes from a store, and they're completely distanced from that. But when you're hunting your own crocodiles, and you have to eat certain foods that are kind of suspect, it breaks down those barriers, and that bewilderment that I was talking about starts to go away. We're not separate from nature anymore. We're not separate from survival. We're not better than it either.
Right now, see, you bring it back full circle. Excellent comeback, by the way. Full
Why,
marks for
thank you, sir.
recovery. But the reality is, you are 100% correct. In our modern society, particularly here in America, and a lot of Europe, even more so, because it's still in America, we still have a hunting, fishing culture that's pretty strong, and we've got so much vast wilderness that it'd be a shame to not be out there in it. But yeah, you're right. A lot of city dwellers, a lot of urbanites from around the world, they do get kind of disconnected from that cycle of life. And so the whole thing is, when you are hunting, fishing, gathering, you become more connected with Earth and you realize that all of these great things out there are provided for us. And I think the big lesson in all of it is, yeah, you have to kill sometimes for life to continue. But when you step back and open the aperture, the macro view, life and death are all part of the process and cycle. And so, as long as you learn when you harvest to try to replace a little bit, when you gather to try and replace a little bit, so that you become in touch with the plants and the animals in your environment, the good ones, the bad ones, what purposes they have. And it really, I think, makes people not only more aware, but also more appreciative. And that's a big part of what you indirectly get out of those survival classes, when you have to come down to that brutal moment of taking a life to preserve your own.
And when it comes to interpersonal dynamics, especially you and your wife, but people in general, you get outside of survival situations, and everyone's supposed to be very nice and cordial and PC all the time, not say certain things, not talk about certain things. One of the things I love about watching you and your wife Ruth together is that you go at it sometimes. It's head to head, and it's not always pretty, but it is very entertaining. You guys are hilarious together. But my point is, real life, especially when things get hard, it's not necessarily supposed to be pretty or polite. It's supposed to be effective, and that's what I think watching you is very. I can see that in a very unique way, and a lot of the other survival shows don't demonstrate that at all.
No, of course not. I mean, most of the shows, it's just a fact. It's mostly fellas that do it, so the shows tend to be skewed towards fellas with fellas, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why the show works so well. And you bring up some interesting points to me, because the wife and I will be in the grocery store and we'll just be discussing, some might define as bickering, about this or that or the other. But the whole time that we're kind of going at it, there's a love and there's a respect, right? And I know if she's saying something, there's a reason. And if I'm saying something, by God, there's a reason, right? So we have those little clashes because, maybe I'm an alpha male, maybe she's an alpha female. Doesn't matter. We're two different humans with different opinions, and we're trying to get them across. But what I always note is, when we have these little conversations, like in the grocery store around others, they're always laughing. And I'm just have to look around and, like, okay, I don't mean it in jest, but people are laughing. I think there's just the nature of the twinkle in the eye when we're having these little heated discussions, right? But the other thing is, I've learned so much from her, and I've seen that, men, women, partners, they bring a balance and they bring counterpoints that, if you are open, very often can be better than your own, or can enhance your own. So there's a lot to be said about the teamwork. And I think, for us, and just so you understand, those shows were really dangerous. I mean, there were many times when Ruth was in tears, not knowing if we were going to survive or not, mainly because she was worried about her little man back at home, right? So, in all those shows, there was a certain amount of tension, from the realities that, man, we were tired, we were hungry, we slept in crappy shelters that we tried to make with camera crew around and getting in the way and scaring off the animals and making my hunting harder, making us hungry and starving and all those things. But we always knew we loved each other, we respected each other, and after this was over, we still had to live. So I think that always that honor and integrity remained consistent throughout the dialogue, whatever, even if we had our little huffs where we had to stomp off and then kind of regroup and come back, we were still in it, and that wasn't going to get us out. So the only way we were going to survive was to work together. And I think that's what really made the show resonate, was they saw just what everybody has. It doesn't matter if you're straight, gay, old, young, rich, poor, educated, uneducated. When you have someone that you care about, inevitably and invariably, you're going to have moments where you conflict. And it's how you respond in those moments and recover from those moments that really define your character and the relationship.
And it's so powerful too, watching you and people like you be in such control of a situation, knowing what to do, having your full power and full wits about you until you get sick or until you get hurt, and then she has to take over, and she's the one who has to take care of you, and that you need to plan for those contingencies, right?
I think so, but one other thing about contingencies versus exigencies is exigencies you don't really know or expect, so you kind of can't. So then you're just responding, right? So, for example, like the fire episode that we did, we really created by talking to experts a survival shelter that we let a real fire come over us, and we weren't sure if we are going to make it on that one, right? So that was a tense moment when we're in Croatia going down that rock face to get to the water, the only water we had seen in days. We had no idea if that ledge was going to drop off or not. We didn't know. Our SAS guy said, "Oh hell no, I'm not going down that thing." Our producer said, "Oh hell no, I'm going down that thing." And then we had a cameraman who just happened to be perhaps a little bit fatalistic, who was the only one that said, "I'll go." And the wife and I, looked at each other like, "Okay, that's not a good sign, right?" But so we did those things that they were exigencies we didn't expect, right? We didn't know. But then, like the one that I think you're referencing, when we were out at sea, right? We had planned to use a tarp over top of us, but for the film crew, they would come out and film us, and then they'd go back to shore, and we had to stay out there, and they couldn't film us with the top on because it was such a contrast as the boats were bobbing up and down into the dark and into the light. So we had to take the tarp down to film the show. Naturally, after 2 days of being in that scorching Bahama sun, I was done, and I was literally going down. And my wife wanted to tap out. My medic wanted to tap out. And he's a pretty badass special forces medic. And I said, "Wait a minute. I remember seeing some nasty water up in the bow where the rope was. So let's try to get that in me." And that's how we improvise. And that little bit of water getting inside me is what actually allowed us to finish out that episode. But it was, we had a lot of moments where we did truly nearly die. And I think that's also what brought us closer together in the long run, too.
I'm curious about the long-term care after some of those close calls, like if you were drinking a lot of suspect water or eating bugs or, not being able to fully clean everything and sanitize and what have you. I mean, are you guys like hitting rounds of anti-parasitics afterwards? Are you doing some sort of cleanse or detox? Like what happens after the shows? I've
No,
always been
these
curious.
are brilliant questions, right? So when I first got started, I think I did a show in '98 for MTV. Then I ended up doing Science of Survival for Discovery in '06. And then in, I think this was '09, they were casting me for Dual Survival, but then they saw the show with my wife and they said, "Oh no, you do that." And so Dave ended up on Dual Survival. And as the wife and I were getting ready to do this show, obviously one of the things, I am a special forces medic. I'm still current with my paramedic license, my deputy license, my radio operator license, all that kind of stuff, right? So I told the producers of the show, "Hey, for this first episode that we're going to film in the Mexican desert, you have to film at night. So you got to bring in night cameras, and we can film at dawn and dusk. And we need to go when it's full moon so we have maximum light so we can move at night, right? You can't, in the desert, you don't do anything in the daytime." They're like, "Oh no, can't be done." It was early days, right? So when I think Dual Survival guys learned from us, because later they went into the desert and they actually did it at night and with night cameras like I recommended, right? But this was the first one. And the point here is that they asked us to film in the day, and we did it. And of course, the water was crap. We couldn't get anything done. We were getting cooked. And they literally did fry my wife's hypothalamus. Even to this day, she can't go out in hot environments for very long without having to stop, because she got permanently damaged from that episode, right? And it was only because I grabbed the cameraman, and the producers were off in the distance looking on a distant viewer, and I said, "Hey man, if my wife doesn't leave this desert, you guys ain't leaving this desert. So bring the medic on camera now. And they did. And we kind of, that was really good in a way because we broke a precedent. We broke down that fourth wall and said, hey, we are out here living this for real, doing this to teach you, but we can also die. In survival, people do die. And the desert is one of the places where it happens a lot. So, is for all practical purposes, we died in that show, but we brought the medic in and we showed that reality. And we ended up having to do that once more in Alaska, where hey, a blizzard came in and we just died. Fire went out. I was smoked. I didn't have enough food in me because it was a transition from the winter to the spring and nothing was growing. We could barely walk. Everything was slush. So there were a couple times that we had to tap out, but we did have real injuries on there. And to answer you, yes, we when we first negotiated the contract with Discovery, we said, look, I'm not Bear. I do stuff for real. I have a medical background, and there's all these diseases that we can get, all these cuts and scrapes. And so we needed downtime to let all that mend, to take the anti-parasitics and antibiotics you mentioned so that we could heal and recover and then go out and do another episode. So you're absolutely spot on with that.
And when people are trying to calculate the risk of what's going to eat you or kill you out there, oftentimes people who haven't spent a lot of time in the backwoods or in the desert don't really know that, in fact, it's generally the elements or lack of resources like water that'll get you first. Not you're generally like trying to having a bear or a mountain lion chase after you makes great television, but that's usually not the biggest risk, right?
Yes, man. You're spot on. It is. There's lots of critters out there. We're definitely on the food chain when we step out into Mother Nature, right? But most of the critters have realized humans are bad and they stay away from you unless you happen to bump into them near their den or their babies or something like that, or they're really, really hungry, or perhaps have rabies or something. 100%. The biggest thing that's going to get you is usually the environment. Sun, cold, wind, bugs and dirt, infections, sickness just from eating with dirty hands. Those simple things are what kill more people than any lions, tigers, and bears, oh my.
Even just little cuts and scrapes you mentioned can be killers.
100%, man, especially if you are in the tropics and you get a couple of cuts and scrapes, which you're going to get, and then those get infected, and then you get, streptococcus, where you get the little Rice Krispies on bubbles under your skin from that little anaerobic, bacteria. And next thing you know, you got septicemia, and then you're dead.
So what's the best way to stay clean or try to manage that as best you can when you're in super gnarly conditions like that?
Well, the biggest thing that gets most people are dirty hands, right? Everything that you're picking up to eat and drink and all that, you get your hands dirty, you put that in your mouth, and then you get sick. So if they can either keep their hands clean, wash their hands. If they don't have water, if they've got a fire, use the ash from the fire to keep their hands clean because that fights the bacteria. If nothing else, just air and sun will help kill bacteria on your hands. But also gloves go a long way. And then the other thing is just keep yourself as clean as you can. Even if you can't use water, get dirt on you and clean it, because that will take a lot of the sweat and bacteria off. Or if nothing else, just get naked and lay in the sun and let the UV kind of kill some of the bacteria. But those are ways that people can keep themselves a little bit healthier and increase their chances of survival. And it is the number one killer.
And how about clean water? I've seen you prepare water in all sorts of different ways. And some people say rolling boil for 10 minutes. Some people say throw a rock in there, let it get to a roll for a little bit. And I know you have your own opinions about this.
Well, it's funny. There's lots of different theories and whatnot, and I think most of the myths have been busted now that everybody's got the technology and all the interwebs and the videos, right? So everybody can experiment with stuff. But the big realities are that dirty water is the number one killer. That's diarrhea still kills more people around the world than anything through cholera and all that, and it mostly comes from the dirty water and mosquitoes in the dirty water, right? So ways that people can keep hydrated is obviously collect rainwater. Obviously treat it if you have chemicals or UV lights or anything like that. But in worst case scenarios, if you can boil the water, then you can make it safe. The reality is, see if I remember my numbers correctly. It's been a spell, but basically water hits a boiling point, I think at about 212 degrees. And right about at 183 degrees is where most of the bacteria that can hurt a person die, right? So as soon as it hits a rolling boil, you've gone well past that number and it is safe to drink. And the reason that becomes important, I think people boil water for a long time. Like if it's like nasty, dirty, stinky water, boiling it for a while might get rid of some of the smells. But where it becomes important to me to know exactly when to stop is gathering firewood and making a fire are not easy. right? And I don't want to waste that energy gathering firewood and keep this thing boiling for 5 more minutes than I need to. As soon as it hits a rolling boil, it's ready. Take it off, let it cool, drink, hydrate, and get right back to the process. So that's the actual scientific rule.
I'm curious about what actually. We can talk about fear next, but like, what is there anything that rears its ugly head to you, or are you kind of conditioned to the point where you know how to handle it? Is there something that's out of whack where it feels more scary than it actually is?
No, that's a wonderful question, man, because I think fear is one of the bigger mental issues that most people will face in a survival situation and do face when they're in a survival situation or POWs, right? And fear really sets in when people are isolated and alone, right? Like, am I ever going to be found? Am I going to die here? Will they ever know my story? And that stuff really starts to eat at you, right? So for me, absolutely, I'm afraid to fail my family. I'm afraid to let them down and die, and then they may die because I've died and not kept myself alive and kept them alive, right? So that is a big concern for me, and that helps me overcome my other fears. I mean, I've been stalked by a jaguar through the Amazon jungle for 3 days. I've had face to face with big game like bear. Even a damn moose can be scary when you're walking around with no rifle, right? I mean, that thing could kill you. So I've faced these fears. I have them, but I'm able to overcome them and focus beyond them because I have something else that's more important to me than me, which is the people that I love. And that helps me try to either avoid it or navigate it or extricate myself from it. But fear is 100% one of the biggest things people will face out there because it's scary.
And people sometimes have an unexpected response to fear where they lose their heads, right? Like a lot of people will just completely go out of their minds and lose their higher capacities. Is there a way to recognize that? How do you handle that in group dynamics?
Well, in a group dynamic, it's a little bit different. Like when I'm leading a group in a survival class, I'll get some people that will panic a little bit and start to worry. But because I'm there, I can calm them down, right? But you're right. What do you do? How do you check your own fire when you're starting to run amok with fear? And you're not making clear decisions, right? So, and I'm not sure what the answer is, to be quite frank on that. It's one of those things where they have to have the ability to take a breath and take a pause and ask, is what I'm doing increasing or bettering my situation? If it's not, it's a waste of time. So screaming, yelling, pulling your hair out, running around like chicken with your head cut off isn't going to do anything except get you dead, get you it, right? So what can you do? All right, I got a big critter in front of me. Do I have a stick? Do I have a rock? Do I have sound, sand? Can I throw something at anything? And now you're taking control of the fear and you're starting to take positive actions that could possibly positively out affect your outcome, right? But in the absence of slowing yourself down, thinking it through and making sound decisions and taking sound actions. Fear. Here's a quote from the 13th Warrior, right? Fear profit a man nothing. Plain and simple.
So we'll all experience it, but you have to know how to handle it and you meet it with the right kind of action. But sometimes people can disagree about what that means, right?
Yeah, I mean, and that those are what we call TTPs, right? Techniques, tactic, procedures. Different people have different courses of action that they may choose. Like if you're a big burly guy, you may choose to square up with that critter and engage it directly, right? If you're a tall, long-legged, young, fit person, you might decide, oh hell no, I can outrun it, right? So I'm gone, right? Some people might decide, okay, I can't fight, I know I can't escape, but maybe if I freeze, that will make it, leave me alone or go away. And those, the fight, flight, fright, those are all normal survival coping mechanisms. And sometimes that freezing has a place. Usually it doesn't. Usually it just means you lay still while that bear decides to take a munch on you, right? So, but those are all the main ways that people respond. And the biggest thing is know yourself, know your strengths and your weaknesses, and work with them and around them.
And you're larger than life on camera, but in real life, you're actually not that tall, right? Like facing off against a giant bear or another predator. I'm not either. Like I'm not either.
I, well, I'm actually, I was 5'10". I'm not tall. And I've always liked that because in conflicts, it's the tall guys that the snipers find, right? So And what I always tell all my big buddies, because they're all like hulking, giant Viking types, right? So it's like, you still got knees, and I can get to your knees before you can get to me. So, it kind of levels the playing field, right? But yeah, and now I'm like 5'9" because, just getting older, cotton top and broken neck, broken back, dislocated hips and shoulders, from the military service. So, but what I always jokingly tell people is, yeah, I always look big on TV because we hire midgets for cameramen. So they're always filming up. But that's not true. My cameraman's huge.
But to your point, you need to assess yourself where you're at, know what your weaknesses are before you start kind of engaging in that.
Absolutely. It's like you hear that old thing, don't fight with old guys because, they might not be able to beat you with speed or strength, but they're going to probably beat you with trickery and dastardly deeds.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to go face to face with an old legend. But so, what are the things that you see as some major mistakes that people make? Say in the presence of fear, what are some things to watch out for that that some of us might not be aware of?
Well, I think the biggest thing, I mean, these are good questions, so thanks for those. I think the biggest thing that happens when people um, are overcome by fear, they panic. And when they start panicking, they stop thinking clearly, right? So I think the biggest thing is take some breaths, and ask yourself, what can I do to make this better? And just by actually having a conscious dialogue with your inner mind is usually enough to snap the fear and get them back on track, right? And I've seen this in military units, and I've seen it in war zones. Fear is like a virus that spreads very, very quickly, if you don't put it in check. And all it takes is one person or one moment or one calming thing or sentence to change the whole dynamic. And that's what people really need to do for themselves. Once you start realizing I'm losing my control, breathe, you know, God, great spirit, help me. Focus and act. Usually that will get you centered and doing the right thing.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about. I think you mentioned it's called a what is it? A blood sucking tick of a rucksack. People who think that more is better, bringing everything with you is not the right call if you're going into a survival situation. How do we manage that?
Well, I mean, it's one of these kind of jokes in the military, right? Especially as special ops guys. We have 120 pounds of lightweight gear, but it's still 120 pounds, and
That's
that's
a lot of
usually
weight.
about the amount of weight. Yeah, that's a lot, right? So you see all these old guys hunched over like that. They're probably in special ops somewhere, carried a rucksack their whole career, right? So it's one of those things where you got to find the right balance. Obviously, the more you have, the better, right? But obviously, got to know your own strengths and weaknesses. Are you going to be able to hump a 120 pound rucksack for, weeks on end with all that weight? So it's about packing smarter, figuring out what you really need, what you don't really need, right? And then finding that right balance. But I'd say for most people, a good healthy size rucksack that should be able to carry everything you need but not be too heavy that you can't do whatever you need is right around 45 pounds. I think that's what the military found is what most humans can carry without any major negative impacts on them. So that's the weight. But clearly, we always say travel light, freeze at night. That's another adage that you don't want if you don't have to in survival. But what I remind people is usually the survival happens when you're not expected. So you're not camping and you got all your gear on you and then poof, you're in a survival situation, right? Usually something horrible has just happened, a boat crash, plane crash, some kind of massive fire or something like that in your cabin, and you got to run out in the woods and now crap, I don't have anything. And if so, what I tell people is, hey, go out and camp, practice your survival skills in a friendly environment. When you got your tent, your food, and your water, you can get your little marshmallows and s'mores and all that kind of stuff, right? But go out in the woods, keep your eye on your tent so you don't get lost or get a pace count and azimuth with your compass and map. But practice what you would do without those things. And then you start to learn, okay, what do I really need? If I slept outside of my tent, right? If a storm comes, I could jump in my tent. If it's really bad, I can jump my car and go home, right? But practice sleeping on the ground. What does that look like for you? Make your own fire. Don't use the campsite fire. Figure out how much wood you actually need to gather up to keep you warm and cook your food for you and or your wife and kids, family. And that's the other thing people don't think about is how much stuff I need for me and then how much stuff I need for the other people in my family. Like, for the longest time, I used to carry a really heavy rucksack because my little squidgers, they couldn't carry that much. So I carried stuff to make it nice for them, little showering things, little tables that we can sit out on, chairs and all that. But man, that made for a heavy rucksack. Now I was young, strapping stud muffin at the time, so I didn't mind. It kept me, fit for my special forces duties. But that's not the norm for most people, right? But the big thing is pack stuff and then go out at least once or twice a year by yourself with someone you love and practice. But you asked about the big mistakes that people make. Also, if you do go out by yourself, let someone know where you're going. And even if you go out with a group, let somebody know where you're going and when you expect to come back and how to reach you, right? So that way, the biggest thing I tell people when survival happens, first thing you want to do is ET phone home. If you can go home, there's no more survival, right? And then from there, everything else happens. Then the next most important decision is, do I stay or do I go? And if you think you can make it or you can see civilization or something like that, or you know where the road is, it might be worth it. But like if you're lost, man, stay put. That's the best thing because you might not have gone very far. Give the night time, get through the night, and then hopefully the day people will be out looking for you, right? But also if you're near a boat or a plane or your vehicle break down or your cabin, stay there because it's something that makes it easier for overflight when they're doing search and rescue to find you. So did I answer you?
Yeah, it does, and I'll keep going on that because in movies and on TV, people are always just like hitting the road immediately, and it seems like that's the safest option. In real life, it's not necessarily that way, especially, so I've read a few things about grid down scenarios and the super grim expectations that come after that for most civilians, especially where something like 9 out of 10 people will die in a year if the grid is down, according to some estimates. Why do you think that is, considering humans have lived hundreds, thousands of years without any electricity whatsoever? When you're, out in the woods and out in the bush and out in the desert, it doesn't seem like you're bringing your iPhone and all these power banks or anything. So, like, what is the big obsession with this grid up scenario being necessary for survival that most people think is going on?
Again, a wonderful, wonderful topic of discussion, right? So a couple of things, like obviously I'm an older guy, right? And I listen to a lot of the older guys, my generation, a little bit older, and like, these young kids, they're not going to make it. They don't know this. They can't do that. And I'm like, okay, perhaps that's one perspective. However, there's all these other amazing things that they can do that we can't. So I personally believe that each generation comes with a new set of problems, but they also come with a new set of solutions, right? And I believe, like, especially for my fellow Americans, right? They're bad mouthing all the kids in the video games and all that. It's like, look, the technology is new. We as human beings are trying to learn to balance, just like when there was the, agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the technological revolution, right? We'll figure it out. We'll find it. But what I say is, I don't believe what those other negative people say that most people are going to die. I believe unless it's a disease like famine or something like near earth meteor strike or something, I believe people are resilient. Human beings are by nature survivors. It's in our DNA. All it is creative problem solving, right? So everyone, if they get faced with a survival situation, will do a quick assessment. What can I do? What can I not? What do I have? What don't I have? And then they're going to figure it out. They're going to find a way. So I have faith in people that they will find a way. So that's my take on it. But doesn't mean you don't want to be as prepared as you can, right? So don't ignore that part either.
I love that. I love that answer. So let's say grid does go down for 3 days, 7 days for everyone, and we don't really know what's happening. You're at home with your family. What happens next? We could run through maybe your scenario.
Okay, well, my scenario will be a little bit different, but it might be a good baseline measurement for other people, right? So, I mean, I keep everything that I need in my home to survive for 30 days or more, right? I keep everything that I need for my family in my car to survive for 7 days. I keep everything that I need personally on me to survive for 3 days, right? And same with where I work or anywhere where I travel where I can store stuff. So I always keep stuff stored. And I tell people there's 8 pillars of survival: food, water, fire, shelter, then navigation, communications, signals, and security, right? And so then once you start looking at those 8 pillars and you start saying, okay, it's me, my wife, my dog, my cat, my goldfish, my 22 children, and my 23 grandchildren, how much stuff do I need, right? So if you give yourself that stockpile of 30 days at home, 7 days in your vehicle, 3 days in your rucksack, you've got a very good start point. Now, that's us. Okay, so we have the generators and the water collection things and all the stuff, so that even though we live in a city, if the grid goes down, we'll be okay, right? But not everybody has that luxury to do that. And one of the things that is interesting, is the people factor, right? How will others respond to that situation? You may have it good in your home, right? What about the people that don't have that or don't have a good moral compass, right? And they decide, okay, because things are bad, I can justify that I need to maybe try to take from someone else, right? So those are, I think, the real questions that everyone will have to ask. How will others react? And then how will I respond to that? Right? You got to kind of figure that out beforehand, so you're not too shocked and you freeze in the moment, but also looking at what, the possible outcomes could be. You have to make sure that you're good within your heart, that you can live with it afterwards, right? Whatever your courses of action are that you choose, right? So some people look at one way of getting around that is making like neighborhood type survival communities, right? Like, hey, you got a nice piece of land, you're growing some food. Hey, we got a lake on ours, so you can come get water from our pond, that kind of a thing. So that's another way of going about it. But I think the big thing is, when something bad goes down, it depends on the nature of it, right? Like, is there a total blackout and we don't get anything from, the government? Like, hey, this was a near Earth meteor strike, or this was a power grid hack by, the Chinese or the Russians or something like that. So I think most people will keep it cool for a couple of days while they try to figure out what's what. And then from that point, people will surmise, like, okay, are we in war? Do we need to start being ready for invaders from another country? Or, was it some mass disaster? Was there a big earthquake that split the US in half? All these kinds of things, right? And then from there, I think most people will try to be decent, because it's in human nature to kind of come together. I mean, look at Ukraine, right? How those people are facing such a tremendous threat, and how they've all united, completely, because they realize it's to preserve their survival. So I have hope that most people will bond and come together and work together, but there's always that outlying percentage that you have to be concerned about.
So it's best to get you to know your neighbors now, build those relationships, make sure that they're functioning before it all goes down.
If you can, yes, it's always good. I mean, anytime that you can help other people, there's usually some reciprocity or some karma that kind of comes back. But you do it just because it makes you feel good, right? You try to leave the world a little bit better than what it was when you got there.
And there is this myth, not so much from your show, but definitely some of the other survival shows and movies and stuff like that, that you go it alone and that's the best chance you have. But in communities, it doesn't necessarily work like that. If you're at your house, that's not how it's going down.
Yeah, no, 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 no. I mean, and just like we were talking about at the top of the show, right? I mean, how much I learned from my wife, how many things, even though she wasn't a survival expert, her take on a problem and how to solve it was actually better than my experience take. And I had to learn from that. So I was like, okay, I keep my mind open. So, and, I work with Special Ops Command now, and I see on a day to day basis with all the special ops guys and the engineers, completely different walks of life, how when we come together, we end up with a better result than anything we could have done individually or in our separate groups. So, yeah, there's a lot to be said about the power of human minds working together towards a shared goal.
Is there any sort of training that you have that civilians don't, that you think you could pass along in some way? Like what are the things that they're completely missing and unprepared for that you might be super prepared for? I'm sure there is an endless list.
Okay, so I'm going to address that in 2 ways. I'm going to go back a little bit. One of the things I was mentioning about my military brothers, and they're beating up on the younger guys. I'm like, hey man, yeah, maybe they're soft, maybe they play too many video games, but by God, I dare you to try and take it from them. I guarantee you they will get up and open up a can of whoop ass. Okay. And so now back to my background and what I think I might impart to others to help them. Right. So my childhood was pretty brutal. Right. And I think after talking to many of my special ops brothers, they also had a little bit rougher childhoods than normal. That's the usual model of what is attracted to special ops. And then, of course, you go through all kinds of things like crawling through tight tunnels in SEER school, or doing the free fall off the slide for life, when you're going to ranger school, or any of those kinds of things where you have to do something you are afraid of, right? And so we're constantly facing our fears, and they do that to get you ready for when you face combat. And no one really knows themselves truly until you face the enemy, you see one of your brothers die, and you realize, I got to keep fighting, or I'm going to end up like him. And if his death is going to matter, I got to keep fighting. And so you're able to focus through, right? And so if I were to say anything for civilians, it's like, whatever you do in your life, whatever your path, when you are afraid of something, try to face it. If you're afraid of heights, go bungee jumping, go rock climbing, do it smartly, do it safely, but go do it, right? If you're afraid of the big water, get out there and learn how to scuba dive. Start in a pool and then start in little ponds, but whatever you are afraid of, face it. And if you can cultivate that piece of character within you, then by God, you can do anything that you ever need to when it comes to survival.
I love that. Now, these group scenarios do get political, whether we like it or not. Not like big politics, but like small town politics. Is there a way that you handle that? Like, say someone doesn't want to keep going, but you have to keep going. What do you do? How do you handle that sort of situation?
Yeah, no, those are really good questions, and those usually can only be answered truthfully in the moment, right? I mean, anytime you've got humans, you've got politics. And this has been a harsh lesson for me to learn over the years. It doesn't matter whether it's military, whether it's government, whether it's civilian, whether it's contractor, whether it's in an artsy fartsy world, or, just a sort of a rough and tumble world. Humans are humans. They bring opinions, and they bring personalities, and they bring politics. So that's it, right? So usually I don't care what the group dynamic is, as long as it doesn't get ugly or violent or aggressive. And usually the leader will set the tone. If they are caring and concerned about everybody, everyone else becomes caring and concerned, right? If they become, if they set a standard of calm bravery, then that also trickles down, and everybody kind of rises up to that, right? So, if you start to see a leader, whether they're formal or informal, start to get a little bit ugly or brutal, then you kind of have to bring the group together and say, hey, you might want to check your fire. Maybe you're a little too hungry, a little too tired, you're getting a little too snappy, right? But when you have someone who can't go on, first thing you got to look at, okay, do they have medical injuries or medical conditions, right? Do you have to make allowances? Then you got to decide, okay, can I bring this person along? Can we make something with wheels or maybe a litter that we can carry to help them and show we don't want to leave them, right? But let's say everybody's got like a broken leg and a broken arm, and you just can't do that. You might have to make that tough decision. Do we stay with this person, or do we leave this person? And that's one of the things I address in my books is, hey, those are realities, and you have to be ready for that. So, you leave them with a little bit of food, water if you got it. You leave them in a good position of recovery if they're unconscious. You mark where they are. Everybody tries to remember. You document it, and then you move on, because the best chance of them surviving is if you guys can get to help and bring it back to them.
Yeah. Switching gears a little bit back to what you were talking about before, especially with kids, you have to make it fun, right? And when you're training, sometimes it can be a little bit invisible. I think one of the examples in your book is your son was fishing under like no real survival scenario or whatever, but he was learning about how long he can stay in the water and what happens when he gets too cold. And even though he wasn't actually spearing anything, like he's kind of learning where the fish are and where they like to hide and that sort of thing. So what are some other examples for people who have never gone hunting, fishing, camping, or whatever? What are some good examples to help ease them into it? Because there can be a lot of prep that happens while you're having fun.
Oh, well, make no mistake, preparing for survival with children does require a lot of planning, right? But how do you get the kids to come along on the journey? So what I recommend to people first and foremost is do some camping in Fort Living Room, actually in the house. Set up your tent, make it fun, You can pull out your little stove if you want and open up the windows and whatnot and just do it all in the house, right? And then it's fun and cool. And then they sleep in the tent, they wake up in the tent, and it's like, not so bad. Then the next step is migrated out into the backyard, right? Then the next step is migrated to some fun family friendly camping site and then to some sort of remote hiking camping site. And if you can walk them through those stages, if it should ever happen, they'll probably be as well prepared as you could ever hope. And it's all about making it fun. Hide and seek games. How do you navigate? Make a little map of where we are and where your little hiding places are, right? Hiding some food out there and some water. So they've got to go look and, for food and water. Showing them how to set up little traps and what things they can eat in the environment. Like dandelions are everywhere and they're an acquired taste for sure, but kids can pop one and just pop in their mouth and chew it up and eat it, right? And get a feel for that. So all these little things that just make it fun is, I think, the secret sauce to getting kids interested in survival at an early age so that they want to continue that as they get older. And then nature's no longer scary to them or the unknown. They actually want to get out in it. And now that the more urban we get, I know you can appreciate this because it's, your whole ethos is the more that you appreciate nature, the more you appreciate life, the more you want to be fit to be able to be out in nature. And it's just an ongoing cycle, right? And so even though we may be disconnected from our food and from nature because of the modernity of the times, if they learn to appreciate it at an early age through those types of experiences, it can change how they view everything. And then my hope is, as this next generation comes up, they realize there's just human population growth going on like crazy, right? So when I was born, 3 billion people. When I die, be 9 billion people. That's triple the humans on the planet in one lifetime that it took all of humanity to get to when I was born, right? So our precious resources, water, nature, running out. So I'm hoping that by this kind of conversation and discourse that we're having now, that young parents your age will get their kids into this stuff. They'll grow up wanting to preserve nature. And it's just an ongoing cycle, and they'll become better stewards of planet Earth through these kinds of information outlets that we give to people, right? So thanks for what you're doing.
Of course, thank you. And how about this real quick? There's a big talk, especially in the nutrition world, about plant-based, all vegan versus killing animals, and that's really bad for us. It's bad for the environment. It's bad for everything. When you're out in a survival situation, calories, protein in particular, fat definitely become a big issue, and it's very difficult to source that from plant-based or vegan foods when you're really out there. So I would love to hear your take on that conversation.
No, it's a very valid discussion, right? One of the things I would just want to point out to everybody without getting too political, eating healthy is usually only an option for the wealthy. Usually, poor people have to eat what they can afford, and that's going to be a lot of canned goods, a lot of preservatives, and all that. And it's just the way for now. Hopefully, we can change that, right? So, and the same thing when you start talking about plant-based protein versus animal proteins. Man, you with the science and the technology making so many things available to us, so many different options. I think you can equally go one way or the other, depending on what your other interests are, right? If you want to be a vegan, if you don't have a problem with eating, animal-based proteins. But when it comes to survival, it is survival. These are not options. You eat what you can. And the fact of the matter is, there's just, unless you happen to be in like a nut tree grove or something that's going to give you lots of fats and proteins, you're usually not going to get enough from just the plants that you can find in whatever environment you are. It's usually going to be more sustenance from taking an animal's life, the proteins, the fats, and that's just the reality of it. So I don't think people have the luxury to be picky eaters when they're out surviving.
Yeah, and when you're in society, like trying to undereat 2,000 or 2,500 calories is one thing, but when you're trying to source 2,000 or 2,500 calories, that's a completely different calculus, right? Maybe you can just expand on how hard that can be in some cases. How many calories were you eating when you were out there? Did it totally depend on where you were?
Well, let me caveat that with a couple of things, right? First of all, the eating the animals and survival, right? So I've been in like 9 different conflicts, and I consider myself a combat smoker. If I'm in a war zone, I can't drink, I can't choke somebody, so I end up smoking, right? And I just smoke in that environment. And then when I'm back, I'm done. Done, right? I haven't smoked a cigarette in years and years. Not even my last tour in Afghanistan, 2019 to 2020, doing combat search and rescue for State Department. Didn't smoke there. The and people say, "Hey, man, aren't you worried about that smoking killing you?" It's like right now I'm worried about a lead salad killing me. So if I live long enough to die from cancer, I'll consider that a win, right? So now I say that to say this: it's like whatever your diet is, if you're surviving, eat what you must to survive. Okay. I mean, I've eaten dead raccoon that had pus coming out of it because I could cook it well enough to get some the protein from the meat. Right. That's what I found. So that's what I ate. And it's just one of those things where I tell people, you do what you have to survive. You eat what you can. You can bicker about it all later. At the end of the day, and then you asked me one other question. I'm sorry, I went down a different road with the combat smoking stuff when we were talking about the survival food.
Yeah, when you're out there in suspect conditions, we can get away with under eating for a while, but were you shooting for 2,000, 2,500 calories a day?
Yeah. So, and then I will caveat what I was saying. The soldiers, I mean, each one of our meals is like 2,500 or so calories, like a whole day's worth of calories in one meal. And they do that on purpose in case we can only get one meal, right? So, but they also know that in the normal workload of a soldier, we're going to burn up much more than, we'll eat 3 MREs and burn most of those calories the same, right? So sometimes when you're surviving, first of all, unless you're really well read on all the nutritious values of things, I tell people don't count calories, unless you know that and you want to do it and it works for you, to help get you through. Because when people are surviving, they might recount their favorite movies or their favorite book or something, right? So if counting calories works for you, good. But what I tell people is eat whatever you can, try to get maximum amount of calories. Don't worry about how much you get, because if you measure and you fall short, it's real easy to start feel like, oh, now I'm imagining my body eating on itself because I don't have enough calories, and I start to get depressed. So just like, hey man, if I get one nut a day, if I get one caterpillar a day, that's a win, little victories, and that gets me through to another day. So I tell people, don't worry about counting calories, just worry about eating food and you'll be okay.
Do you go into a mode of fasting if there just is no food? Like in some cases, it's an on or off switch, and you don't like start getting hungry until you start eating. Do you ever treat it that way, or are you always just going for the food that you can get out there?
Yeah, I think in a real survival situation, when you don't have a stockpile, right? You never know what you're going to get. So you take what you get as you get it, and that's it. And if you do find abundance, then you stock that, store it, try to preserve it the best you can, especially if you're making a movement, right? If you're staying put and you can start to put up traps and, snares, maybe do some fishing, maybe some hunting, because you got time to clean something, make a fire, prepare it, cook it, eat it, and all that kind of stuff. But when you're on the move, it's a lot more difficult. But in either case, I would not encourage anyone to forego food thinking, hey, I've got my calorie intake for the day, I'm good. Just, keep on at it and expect most likely that you won't. And what happens is the human body is an amazing thing. We're so fragile, we're so easy to, kill with an injury or an illness, but also we can be so tough and resilient. So people, when they find their body start eating less, body starts maybe performing a little bit less, but it starts shutting down. It adjusts on its own. You don't even have to worry about it. So if you got food, eat. If you don't, you can't. Your body will adjust. Just keep the mind working and you'll keep moving forward.
Love it. Well, Mykel, we're just about out of time, but before we go, please tell folks about your new TV shows, all of your work. Let's see. Family Survival Guide is a fantastic book. I also will be putting this into my bug out bag, the Special Forces Survival Handbook. I've gone through so many of these survival books. I'm kind of a junkie and just like going through, and this is probably my favorite right here.
I'm
Foraging for
glad you
Survival.
mentioned that. Let me mention
Yeah, yeah.
this. Okay, so I had a big fat survival book. Okay, that book you
Yes,
just
I have
showed
that one
is
too.
half of this. It's half of this. So this, when the publishers came out with the skinnier book, they actually decided they didn't need the fat book anymore, and the fat book was actually going on the aftermarket for like 2 grand on Amazon. I was like, what? And then I realized it's because that one talks about nuclear, biological, chemical wars. Talks about cannibalism and all those other things that most of the survival books out there don't really talk about. So I went to the publisher and said, hey, you might want to re-release this. And so they did. So that's out there as well. And it's cheaper now because it's in a little, like a Pulp Fiction kind of book. But it's a really, really good book. But yeah, thank you for pointing out those shows. I just did a big show for Discovery in India, India's Ultimate Warrior. That will probably be coming to the States pretty soon. Really fantastic show about the true character and nature of a warrior, not just being a big toughie, right? And so I'm really proud of that show. It's really honorable, really worthy, family friendly. Next show that's coming out is going to be with Kelsey Grammer on Fox. I think that starts on May 1st. It's called Historic American Battles. And they interview me throughout the series as like the survival, combat, and special ops expert, commenting on, those significant wars like the Revolutionary and Civil War in America, right? So that should be a really fun, interesting show. We have some other things in the pipeline. We're getting ready to come out with a new project called Survival Homes and Garden, which will be an online magazine, which will have a whole bunch of stuff for everybody in it. Very excited about that. And we're working on some other little things like survival guns, survival booze, and a survival kids cartoon. But we'll save all that for when they're ready. But that just is a little sneak preview.
That's amazing. Well, anyway, if you haven't come across Mykel Hawke's work and his wife Ruth as well, please go check it out right now. The books, the TV shows, all this. I can't believe how much you put out there between all of this, but I really appreciate it. Wish we could clone you a million times. I mean that.
Well, thank you. I just love teaching and sharing that knowledge. One day I'll be pushing up daisies, and if that helps somebody else after I'm gone, and I count that as a win. So thanks for having me and allowing me another chance to help people.
Hey, anytime. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you. Take good care now.
Hey, it's Abel one last time, and I just want to say thank you for listening to this episode of Fat Burning Man. Before you go, please smash that like button, hit subscribe, or even leave us a quick review. It helps so much more than you even realize. And if you can think of someone else who you care about, friend, family member, anyone else who might appreciate this free show, then please take a quick second just to share it with them. Word of mouth is really the way that we've grown this show over the years. We have more than, at this point, 4 awards in independent media, 50 million downloads. We couldn't do any of this without you, so we really appreciate it. If you'd like to get in touch with me, then please follow me under Abel James or Fat Burning Man on your social media platform of choice, and I'll do my best to get right back to you. Now, if you want to keep this show coming to you, you can do something really quickly here. My wife Allison and I, along with a very small team, depend on listeners like you to make this show happen week after week. To join our next challenge coaching group or get in touch with me one-on-one, visit fatburningman.com. We also make group coaching free with your subscribe and save orders from our family company, Wild Superfoods, which you can find at wildsuperfoods.com. And if you'd like, you can throw a few bucks into the tip jar as a one-time donation or become a contributing member of our group on Patreon. Just look up Abel James on Patreon, and you can join in the fun for as little as a few bucks and get my international best-selling book and audiobook as a special thanks. You can also find that page at fatburningman.com/tipjar. Now, a quick disclaimer for all those legal eagles out there. The Fat Burning Man Show provides general information and discussions about health and related subjects. The information provided in this show or in any related materials are not intended and should not be construed as medical advice, nor is the information a substitute for professional medical expertise, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions and views expressed on this show have no relation to those of any academic, hospital, health practice, or other institution, including corporate overlords. We don't have any of those. If you or any other person has a medical concern, I wholeheartedly encourage you to consult with your healthcare provider. Whew, okay. Don't forget to join our newsletter over at fatburningman.com. When you sign up for our email, I'll even send you a wild quick start guide along with a few of our ridiculously tasty recipes, even Allison's famous chocolate nut cookies, as a special thanks for signing up. This is Abel James signing off. Thank you so much for listening and have a great week.